Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
It was very Timberlake of us. I agree with that.
As are most things about us.
Oh, yeah. We're heartthrobs.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Hi.
Hi.
My name is David Bell.
I'm Adam Todd Brown.
And we just watched Reagan.
Ooh. Yeah. Yay, Reagan. All right.
I was a brand new KGB officer, given my first intelligence assignment. A certain actor and union leader.
Dutch, there's a purpose for your life.
You can run from a bully for so long, but after a while, you're going to have to stand up to him.
This was a movie, you know?
All right, so I'm not sure it was.
Yeah.
But we'll debate that. We can debate that. Adam, thank you so much for being on. Before we get started, Adam Todd Brown.
Yes.
I always do Todd Brown. Adam Todd Brown.
Uh-huh.
Not Adam Todd Brown. Adam Todd Brown.
Right. Todd with one
Right.
D. It means death in German.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
What do you got going on? What do you want to tell people about at the start of all this?
I have a solo podcast that people can listen to called In Broad Daylight. It's everywhere. You can get it everywhere podcasts are, or on YouTube at Adam Todd Brown Comedy. And I'm still doing all the other stuff, but listen to my solo podcast or I'll kick your ass.
It's everywhere like the devil.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in all of us, all of our hearts.
Just like God, too, Dave. Come on.
Sure. So yeah, thank you. Oh my God, I'm so happy that you agreed to watch Reagan with me.
I spent hard-earned money doing this.
I use my AMC thing, my AMC thing.
Yeah.
I did. I totally legally checked to see if perhaps it was online, and it turns out that even the people who perhaps put movies online did not put this movie online.
Yeah, I had already bought my ticket by the time I thought, oh shit, maybe someone has uploaded this somewhere and I can just watch a bootleg version. Nah.
All right, I don't know what your theater was like. Mine, all right, so when I first went in, I'm almost certain the only other person there was also there for a podcast. They were sitting in the back looking really embarrassed. But then like as the trailers were going, a couple lone gunmen looking dudes started sitting in. The guy in front of me spent the entire time on his phone. No, like, and I not that I cared, but no courtesy for me. Like his phone was just bright.
Oh, that sucks.
To the point that I could see what he was looking at. He was looking at Reagan's Wikipedia the entire time. And honestly, that's kind of, I was like, good for you, because then you can watch in real time and go like, oh, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, that's bullshit.
Yeah, my theater was jam-packed with senior citizens.
Yep.
Who were hooting and hollering the whole time. And let me tell you, that turned into some back and forth, because I'm not just going to let them cheer for Reagan saying, well, protesters can't just break any law they want.
Yeah.
And then I'm supposed to be silent when they're like, but Reagan didn't trade arms for hostages. I literally shouted out, yes, he did. And I was like in the back corner. So it was very easily identifiable where my shouts were coming from. I also, when they were signing the SALT treaty and they like leaned in, I went, kiss! Just to be an asshole. It's fun.
Oh, starting fights in the Reagan movie. I love it.
I didn't think people were going to be as exuberant as they were. And I was like, this is gross. And it smelled like old people in there. I was the only person under the age of, I'd say 60 at least.
Yeah.
It was a Reagan crowd for sure.
Well, this movie made so far what I don't think he's even made $1 million. It cost 25. So if people are interested in seeing this movie, it'll be on streaming soon enough, or it'll be on Daily Wire Plus or whatever. Because this is so going into this, it should be noted it's the writer and director, or it's like they're separate writer and separate director, but they worked on God's Not Dead.
Oh,
so yeah, so this is just a propaganda film. Like it's not this took apparently 10 years to get made because nobody wanted it. For obvious reasons.
That makes sense because I kid you not, my first introduction to this movie and the fact that it existed was an episode of Pawn Stars from a few years ago where Dennis Quaid, or someone brings in a signed poster from the Reagan movie. And I was like, what movie is this? And Dennis Quaid is on the episode. He shows up. And that was years ago. And now this movie just came out.
Yeah. And it is, Dennis Quaid has done a lot of weird, like he did like On a Wing and a Prayer or whatever. He's done a lot of like kind of evangelist or right wing things.
Yeah.
It's all the usual suspects and Xander Berkeley, who I would argue is just in everything.
Yeah.
And this is like, this just confirms it that you can get Xander. We could have Xander Berkeley for this podcast.
He played George Schultz, right? Who
I think so, yeah.
I feel like they sort of imply was a KGB agent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. They imply a lot of things are KGB agents.
That was weird. Before we talk about the movie, can we talk about the trailers that played before it? I asked, you didn't get this one. There is a documentary coming out about the notion that Abraham Lincoln was maybe gay.
Right.
It's called Lover of Men.
Huh.
And they played that trailer before my screening of Reagan, and those 80-year-old Republicans were upset. And that part was great. They started booing at one point. It was so fun. It was so fun.
I got a trailer. I forget what I think I actually wrote it down because I was like, what the fuck is this? BAU? B-A-U? It was Emil Hirsch in a concentration camp love story.
I got that one too.
And like, what was that? Because know. I'm not, it wasn't like trying to show that like Nazis were good. Don't get me wrong. But it was really romanticizing the concentration camp. Yeah. They're like dancing in the snow in the camp. And I'm like, I don't think they were allowed to do that. That's
yeah, it kind of makes
what is that?
Kind of makes it seem like the worst thing about concentration camps was that everyone slept in the same room and it was kind of cramped. It's like, I think there was more to it than that.
Yeah, there were some unhinged trailers before this.
There sure
Folks,
were.
Don't see Reagan. We're going to listen. We saw it and it'll trickle down to you from
exactly.
us. That's how that works.
Trickle down viewership. You're welcome, Reagan.
All right. So yeah, this movie it's propaganda. But it's very bad propaganda. Yeah. So the entire John Voight's in this. They de-aged John Voight through a combination of a beard and dim lighting.
Yes. Well, he's Russian in this, so there's no light in Russia.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah, he plays a KGB agent who is approached by a young hip. Who is that supposed to be?
Fuck, I don't know.
I thought it was supposed to, they were going to reveal it's Putin or something. Like I assume.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, how did the Americans beat us? And he's like, I'll tell you how. A man named Ronald Reagan.
It is like a fucking kid's book, this movie. It's so, you're right. It's absolutely propaganda. And it just lies about Reagan at so many points.
It spends exactly, I believe, one shot on the AIDS crisis.
Yes.
In a montage.
And I could not tell if when it said the thing about how many people died under Reagan, I honestly couldn't tell if the movie was showing us that as like a negative thing or like, well, look at all the gay people Reagan killed. Isn't that great?
Right. Because, well, that's the thing is like you could make a movie about Reagan, right?
Yeah.
It would probably piss off a lot of people who liked Reagan. That's just what an actual honest. This to me is like W. Remember W?
Yeah.
It's like everything is very like Dennis Quaid's version of Reagan feels like a sketch version, which is like he did the voice, he talked like this. There's no humanity to the character because they want him to be good and always right in every scene.
Yes.
He's just a caricature of this it's like there's so much worship that he doesn't feel like a human.
Yeah.
He's more like a Greek god in this.
Yeah, this is a glowingly positive portrayal of Reagan.
Yes.
Like they treat him like he is an absolute superhero.
Right. And they also like I don't know where to start. It's also just a bad movie. And what I mean by that is like movies tend to have structures. They have first acts, second acts, third acts.
Yeah.
Things get more dire in the third act. This is like a straight line.
Yes.
There is no arc. It is a long montage, the entire movie, that basically recounts everything in Reagan's life. And because it can't decide what to focus on, it spends 5 minutes on everything.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen this movie, but it is god-awful. The Tupac movie, All Eyes on Me.
I never saw that.
It is a lot like this in that they try to get every Tupac story imaginable in that script. And it ends up just kind of being like a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, that's what this felt like.
Yeah, yeah.
But a bad Wikipedia page.
Yeah, a dishonest Wikipedia page is what this is.
Yeah, it certainly omits a lot of stuff. And they basically just push the idea that he is this guy who was sent by God. Did you catch that scene?
Yeah.
There's a scene where a preacher at a party says like, I do believe God has told me that you will be the next president. And the music gets like mystical and they all go like, do you think he was right? And it's like, oh my God, you are actually implying that Reagan was sent by God to beat the commies.
Yes. I was surprised there was no twist reveal where we find out air traffic controllers were infiltrated by the commies. Because it felt like a lot of this was explaining Reagan's wrongdoing with communists.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, basically it's the idea of it's his single purpose is to fight communism. They begin with his, all right, here's, again, structure. They begin with his giving a speech and then getting shot.
Yes, so the movie never gets better than the opening sequence.
Absolutely. And they show a news anchor imply that it was a communist that did it.
Yeah.
And then they go into the credits, and the credit sequence is showing like it's a montage. It looks like oh, God damn, there's so much. Because the opening speech, there's like, I want to talk about the music because the music changes on a dime.
Yeah.
So like it starts with this really inspirational music while he's giving the speech. And then he gets shot, and then it's like a thriller opening.
Yeah.
Where it's like newspaper clippings and news. And then it ends with a shot of a nuke going off.
Yes.
And then it says Reagan.
Yeah, it's a wild intro. Yeah. I also booed very loudly when they showed the title card.
Good.
I had to.
You had to.
Yeah. I was in definitely a theater full of Republicans. It was gross.
Oh, yeah. But what's wild about that opening is when a movie does that, because then it skips back, right? It's like, okay, let's tell his story. When movies do that, that usually implies that that's where the movie will end, right?
Yes.
They start... That's not the end. He gets shot at like the halfway point of this movie.
And it's another thing they just fucking gloss over.
Yes. They start with it like it's going to be really important and a defining moment that'll like change his mind on things or like... But no, it's not. It's just another thing that happens. And in this list of what this... I can't stress enough the entire movie is a KGB agent telling his life story.
The narrator is a Russian KGB agent. Yes.
And he tells like detail. He talks about like Reagan as a lifeguard. Like he's telling all these like if I was that other guy, if I was Putin or whoever, I'd be like, there literally is a part where he goes, where is this going?
Yeah. I thought the narrator was a very interesting choice. There's nothing, I don't know. You're right. There's so much.
There's so
I
much.
want to say about how bad this movie is. And
all right,
like one of the things that really bothered me is after he gets elected the first time, this Russian guy, the narrator, goes, and all those Iranian hostages were freed 30 minutes later. Bitch,
I wrote this down.
It was 5 minutes later. It was not 30 minutes. And it was 5 minutes because Reagan's campaign team made a deal with Iran to keep those hostages as hostages longer to help Reagan get elected. What a fucking hero.
That is a historical fact that this movie acts like Reagan. They're like, amazingly, he was so good. He freed the hostages immediately.
Yes.
And it was like, I wonder why that happened. It's almost as if he had a prior relationship. There's a lot of that. The Lee Atwater stuff is glossed right over.
Yeah.
They're just like, and then he won the primary somehow. And like I love the scene where they show his campaign managers for the first one, and they're trying to show it like a scrappy, like, we're scrappy campaign, bootstraps. And it's like, oh man, this is the part of the campaign you're choosing to, and then completely glossed over like the second primary or anything against Carter. They just right past it. They show his "Were You Better" 4 years ago, and they have a scene where all Americans stop to watch the speech like it's the moon landing. Yeah,
I liked all the scenes where it would be people in Russia watching Reagan on TV, just like in fear. It's like that didn't happen.
I really can't stress enough how boldly propaganda this is, like how toothless it is as a piece of cinema.
Yeah.
We can start. So it's him as a kid. He gets baptized by Kevin Sorbo, who plays the preacher in the town. Incredible. And they show that his hatred of communism comes from learning that they got rid of all the churches. And they're like, from then on, he became like concerned about this. They show him as a lifeguard. And they, God damn. Oh yeah. And then it starts with him in Hollywood. And like he was head of union, all that stuff. He wasn't actually that, like, I just did a lot of research on Reagan. He wasn't really important with the communism stuff. Not that like, that's good. But he wasn't he wasn't like, they literally show the scene where he's having dinner with other actors who are very like lispy, like gay coded actors who are talking about how America is bad. And then they imply that they are like directly working for the communists, for the Soviets rather.
Right.
And that he like single-handedly weeded them out while as an actor.
Yeah, he actually at one point says something along the lines of, I fought the communists in Hollywood and I'll fight them here too. It's like, shut the fuck up.
And John Voight, who I don't believe is a real, like based on anybody real, because he's such a straw man, because he's like, yeah, we totally infiltrated Hollywood. We thought that was really important to do.
Yeah.
And then he stopped us. And I'm like, that's not what happened at all, but sure. So like, oh my fucking God. So yeah, there's that stuff. Him as a child. I'm just going through my notes. It felt like the 50s shot. It felt like they literally put like a rose-colored tint on him in the 50s.
Yeah, I like how they try to use him being a lifeguard as some sort of parallel for his presidency. At one point he says, I knew people were in trouble before they did. It's like, what does that even mean?
They do it a couple of times where they're like, he could read the currents.
Yeah.
And they directly relate those two things, like at the beginning and then like a little bit at the ending. They do it to justify the Ollie North shit.
Yes.
The Iran-Contra.
Which also gets completely glossed over and gets treated like that was just people attacking Ronald Reagan.
They give it about 3 to 5 minutes, and like it's right around the third act. So I thought, like, oh, okay, is this going to be the third act? Nope. Again, the third act is a montage of meetings.
Yes.
That is briefly interrupted by the Ollie North scandal. That is then wrapped up in a few minutes because they're just cramming everything in there.
Yeah, they really focus on the SALT treaty and stuff like that. And one of the things I hate that they left out of this, I mean, I don't know, I wasn't expecting them to include this, but they act like Reagan was so against nuclear weapons and the idea of a nuclear war happening. When the truth is, he was a dispensationalist, which means he thought there needed to be some sort of nuclear confrontation for Jesus to come back.
Right.
And his thinking was that it would be with Russia and that the United States would survive. Where's that in this fucking movie?
I mean, they replaced it with a fantasy of nukes going off.
Yes.
That happens in his eyeball because there's nothing actually exciting to do in this movie. They have to like add a fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, everybody who's against him is bad, and everybody who's with him is good. They show his first wife, and they just like, you know, because he was divorced, and they just show her. They're like, look at this bitch,
Yes,
who's just screaming at him. She says like, I want actors shouldn't be into politics. You need to be an actor. That's it, and that's pretty much all they show. Again, it's so, it's just wild how like. They're so blinded by the warship that they can't tell a good story.
Yeah.
That everybody who's against him has to be like sneering and bad. And then he has to be just the goodest person ever.
Yeah, this is like Leni Riefenstahl level propaganda. This is just meant to glorify Ronald Reagan. They're not trying to tell you his life story. They're not trying to give you any details you didn't know before. It is church, and you are there to worship Ronald Reagan. And God, I hate it so much.
They show him beat the commies as an actor. They do recognize that his acting career went bad, but they completely skim over. They show that he did a bunch of commercials and it was beneath him. And there's like, they bring in Nancy, and it's so, again, there's no charm. Like they have one scene where he's like asked her out on a date in the work meeting. And she's like flustered by it. But like, you think like there's scenes where they're like together at their home and they're both dressed like in matching sweaters.
Yes. Why?
And it's like, are you trying to make them look like fucking aliens? Like, what is happening? There's a scene where he does the Pabst, like the like Vegas Pabst thing.
Yeah.
And they show Nancy like clutching her pearls and being like, oh my, at it. And it's like, you can't even make them look like maybe they're like a little wild or a little human about these situations.
Nope. Yeah. They're a very one-dimensional team in this. Everyone is, because again, they're not trying to tell us a story. Oh man.
His first date, his second date with Nancy, when they kiss, I believe he says I wrote it down. He says the line, "There's nothing like a relationship with a horse."
Yes, I have that in my notes too. Ronald Reagan fucked a horse.
And he hits on her while she is pinned to a tree next to a horse and him. Like it's her between a tree and a horse and Reagan like leaning in. It's stuff like that where like there's moments, because Dennis Quaid plays Reagan like there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it.
It
like,
kind of reminds me of Joaquin Phoenix in Walk the Line, who made Johnny Cash look like he suffered a traumatic head injury halfway through his career.
Yes. There's like a part in this where he like turns to protesters and he shushes them and his face is crazy. He does it. And I was like, certainly you could do another take of that. Like,
yeah,
certainly you wouldn't go like, oh no, cut. Sorry. That's not the mood. We're not going for creepy here, Dennis. we want him to be like a human in this scene. But it's every scene. He's like, it feels like his skull's going to pop out of his face in every given moment. And he feels like there's a lot of, because they don't have de-aging technology. So it's a lot of caked on makeup. So it's very uncanny valley.
Yeah, a little bit. There is one legitimately good and funny scene in this, but it's also ripped off from Spinal Tap. And it's the scene where the Russian prime ministers just keep dying.
Right.
That part was legitimately funny, but it's just the Spinal Tap drummer bit.
Yeah, as someone who's I watched God's Not Dead. I've watched Lady Ballers fairly recently, and what I've learned about this type of stuff is that it's very much kind of these right-wing people being like, they have their fun, let's have our fun, but they can't think of new things. So like it's a lot of old jokes.
Yeah.
Usually jokes just from like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So that's what that felt like, where it was like, they're like that. We know that was funny. So let's do that again. But they can't think of like new funny things to do. Not really.
Yeah.
So they cover, they skip over Reagan as a spokesperson for GE, which is actually why because they do the thing where they're like, why did you leave the Democrats? And he goes, because the Democrats left me. And it's like, no, because you worked for GE for a while, got rich. He became a millionaire working for GE.
Yeah.
And that's when he started becoming anti-union and pro-corporate. But again, they gloss over all the complicated stuff.
Yeah. And the union stuff especially, it felt like they were just constantly hitting on this idea that, unions got infiltrated by communists.
Yep.
Which that's obviously going to be a Reagan worshiper's defense when someone brings up, hey, Reagan gutted labor unions in this country.
Yeah. They gloss of all the things to make a Reagan movie, they completely gloss over Reaganomics or any economic stuff, which was kind of, that would have been really boring. But it feels like anything that's a little complicated. They boiled it down to Reagan was sent by God to become president to fight the communists.
Yep.
And that's it.
And even then, they don't get into any of the fighting communists in Latin America that Reagan did. Like we got that scene where we see all the nuclear bombs going off inside his eyeball. I want the one where he's seeing poor children being fed breakfast and lunch in Latin American countries and has the same fucking reaction. Like, ooh, we got to stop that.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did.
That's what he did.
That's how he fought communism. He made sure people couldn't fucking eat.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very bad.
He was bad. I still maintain our worst president.
And but like you can tell from this movie, because like that guy reading the Wikipedia must have slowly realized, like, man, they're skipping over a lot. They're just showing a lot of highlights. Again, they skip completely over the Lee Atwater stuff. They skip over any racism. They have a scene where when he's like younger, he lets two black kids like stay at his house or something, and like, see, he's not racist. He did this one thing one time for two black kids.
Yeah, that part was bothersome because he was super fucking racist. And all you need to look at is there's so many videos of him when he was campaigning, just like shouting down black people who are protesting his shit, and like doing it in a "how dare you fucking talk to me that way" kind of way.
He and again, this is all the KGB agent telling the story.
Yes,
can't stress that enough. He literally at one point is talking about the books Reagan read as a kid to inspire him to be an actor.
Yeah.
They're like these dime store novels, and I'm like, what? Like someone needs to put this KGB agent to bed. Like he is rambling.
And like, how has no one but this KGB agent heard all this shit about Reagan by that point?
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Oh my fucking God. Yeah, there's a few times like at his ranch where they're like, how much does it cost? And he's like, too much for an honest politician. There's a part where he talks about backstage politics is why he lost the first election or primary, which again is like, dude, that's all you did to win the next election.
Yeah. One of the parts that especially bothered me, and this had more to do with the people in the theater with me, but he's talking to, is it Tip O'Neill? Someone like that. But he's talking about their political differences, and he goes, but after 6 p.m., we're just two Irishmen having beers.
It was amazing.
And the people in the theater started clapping, and it's like, you motherfuckers don't believe that.
Yeah.
Like, you believe that as long as the person you're having beers with agrees with what you're saying.
Right. Well, they want to be the people who believe that, meaning that they want to say, like, see, Reagan didn't put politics aside. It's the Dems. They made it worse. You know, like, there's a lot of that feeling of, like, they don't point to today, but there's a lot of like, see how it was, you know, it was so much better. Everybody hated the commies, but like they do the thing where they're like, you know, he's not against people having different political ideologies. It's just if they're being paid by the Soviets, and it's like, yeah, but a lot of them weren't. Yes. Like a lot of these actors weren't being like you know, it's just. It's creating the straw man situation. Again, it's a lot like the God's Not Dead films where they're like, look at these Christians. They're just minding their own business. It's the atheists that show up and get involved. And it's like, Christians have never minded their own business on a political level. They have gotten into other people's business. That's the entire problem. Yep. But they're like, hey, I just want to worship my God and you can worship yours. And it's like, that's not true. That's what you tell yourself.
Right.
And there's a lot of that of like Reagan, he wasn't like partisan. He was just trying to help American people. There's like a few times where he's like, we're here to help the American people, like talking to his cabinet.
Yeah. And meanwhile, what's the first thing he says when he wakes up in the hospital after being shot? I hope you're all Republicans.
Today, we're all Republicans. Whatever.
Shit. I was never.
They show with that scene, they also have to admit that he wasn't shot by a communist, but they have John Voight say, well, we had plans to shoot him.
Sure.
And so it's like, all right, okay, he wasn't shot by a communist, but what if he was? Imagine if he was.
Yeah, instead of being shot by the CIA. But
they do a bit of that. Like, there's little moments where they have to like kind of admit stuff, like the Ollie North. Again, they spend like 3 minutes. But then they have a scene where like the young KGB guy is like, surely he must have known. And the guy is just like, well, who knows? It's like they're talking about Houdini or something. Like It's a mystery lost to time.
And it's not. We have since come to learn Reagan absolutely knew.
And that's as nuanced as they get. Is go like, maybe. Perhaps.
We would have done it, you know?
Oh, fuck me.
Yeah.
What else happens in this movie? It's again, like I'm trying to think of the middle part because he becomes president, obviously.
Yeah.
I think we get a little, he has his young beatnik speechwriter from California to show like how with the kids he is.
Yeah.
We get the shooting in the middle.
His speechwriter who immediately introduces himself as a member of, was it Young People for Reagan or something like that? It's like, it doesn't matter if he comes from California. If he's part of the Young People for Reagan group, that's not the same thing. It's not.
I think at a certain point in this movie, they needed to remember like, oh, these are all old people. We need to show like that he was hip because the most of the young people in this movie are protesters. Like any young actor is like a sneering protester.
Right.
That literally yells "Make love, not war" at Reagan. And that's it. It's all old people like being very heroic for most of the movie. We get the shooting again at the midpoint.
Scott Stapp is in this. Did you catch Scott Stapp from Creed? He played Frank Sinatra in that club scene.
Kevin Dillon was Jack Warner.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. So it's a lot of greatest hits. We get brief Reaganomics. We get the air traffic controllers, very brief.
Yeah.
Where he just says, I remember how they frame it. He says, I'm going to fire all the air traffic controllers. And they cut to John Voight and he says, if he was willing to cause so much chaos in his own country, we can only imagine what he'd do to us. And so they frame it as like, look how tough he was. And the KGB was so scared because he fired all these air traffic controllers. We get, all right, we get the moment where he's like, do I stand up to the communists? And we get a flashback of his mom letting him get beaten up by bullies to pull himself by his bootstraps while she like watches from the house.
I laughed very loud during that part. When
it's very funny.
Young boy Reagan was getting beat up by bullies. I needed people to hear my delight.
And then he gives a speech at this evangelist convention in Orlando. And I was just like, boy, that is just the worst time and place ever. Like just 80s evangelist Orlando convention. And he gives this vague speech. Was that speech anything? Because they treat it like another moon landing situation where everybody's watching and they go, yes, he said it.
Yeah. What did he say in that speech?
That's what I mean. Is like I was literally taking notes being like, what is everybody cheering about? It was just him basically saying like, commies are bad.
Yeah. What were they wanting him to say though? I forgot. I remember that scene now. And they're like, is he going to say it? Is he going to say it? It's like, who cares? Yeah. I don't even remember what they were wanting him to say.
Yep. Then they say with the economy booming, he had new money to spend, which is, it's noteworthy how much Reagan actually spent, how he ran on the government spends too much. And then,
spent the most.
Yeah. And they add one little line of like, since he fixed everything, we could spend that money now on more stuff.
Everything was pretty much fixed by 84.
Yeah.
We haven't had any problems since.
Yeah.
It's been pretty smooth sailing since then.
They try to cast doubt on his reelection. They do a montage of anti-Reagan stuff, and that's when we get the second of AIDS stuff set to Phil Collins, I believe.
Yes. It's set to Land of Confusion because that Genesis song, Land of Confusion, the video is Reagan puppets.
Right. It's very funny because they need to show he's the underdog and they're like, everybody hated him, but they don't have the rights to like, I don't know, punk stuff. Like they don't have, like they could only get Phil Collins. Yeah. That was as good as it gets.
And I'm surprised Phil Collins would have signed off on that.
Yeah. I assume it's one of those things where like, I think there's certain people, I think he might be like the Xander Berkeley of giving out music or he's like, sure, whatever. Yeah. How much money are you giving me? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
The way they deal with the AIDS crisis in this is as frustrating as the way Reagan dealt with the AIDS crisis in real life.
Yeah. Again, I believe it's one shot of protesters and they never come back to it.
No.
They show him prepping for a debate and they're showing that he's losing his mind. Or they're trying to. They're showing this like They want to imply that it didn't happen until later, but they show like gradual little things.
Yeah.
And then Nancy says, instead of cramming his head with useless numbers, just let Ronnie be Ronnie.
Let Ronnie cook. Damn.
And then he wins the election. We're done with that. He uses his charm.
Yeah.
Although, let's see.
To his credit, and I believe he did say that in the debate. That was a solid line.
That's actually one of my biggest criticisms is Reagan was popular. And they're trying to make him be an underdog, but they have to admit like he was extremely popular and he was seen as extremely charming. One of the problems with this movie is he doesn't come off as charming.
No.
He's not personable in this because they're playing him as like this monolith. They're like, they don't know how to humanize this guy.
Right.
And so it's just like everybody's in awe of him. Everybody's saying, like, Margaret Thatcher is in this, and she's like, you're a very different kind of American. She's like really horny for him.
Yeah, and there's a scene where he's giving the tear down this wall speech.
That's the ending, yeah.
And Margaret Thatcher's watching, and she goes, "Go get him, cowboy." Like,
yeah.
Fuck both of you.
Ugh. That was incredible. That line was so amazing.
I did, by the end, get a little teary-eyed, I'll admit, because I was watching a video of LeBron James giving his shoes to a young fan. By the end of this.
Yeah.
I did post up way back in the corner, so I could be on my phone.
Oh, me too. I was in the back so I could take notes the entire time, and I got bored, and I was on Twitter and doing other things, and like, I think the most humanizing they get is him killing the fish. That was as good as it got, and even that was like him killing a fish because he couldn't feed it.
Yeah, it's a fucking
but
fish.
They do a bit where he's feeding a kid's fish, and then he kills it, and he has to leave the kid a note, and he goes, "The world can wait. The nation can wait. I have to leave this kid the note." Again, it's all in service of look how great he was.
Right.
This is around where we get her in Contra. These people want to destroy you, she says. She says, "Tell them the truth," Nancy Reagan does. And then the truth is a lie.
Right. Yeah, where was his weird advisor also? Nancy Reagan kept that weird spiritual advisor around, and you never see that lady.
Yeah, no, you never see a lot of certain people on the sidelines.
Yeah, they really make Reagan seem like the brains of the operation. And I think Reagan even readily admitted he was not the brains of that operation.
No, he really wasn't. Like, he very famously, like, you know what wasn't in this? The Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
The people who basically put a big book on his desk and said, do all these things. And then he did he proposed 60% of those things. Like, he is famously not, kind of just a vessel for a lot of other political interests.
Right. And the CIA is not in this, which feels like an oversight, seeing as how his vice president was the former director of the CIA.
Was Bush in this at all?
No, I don't think
Bush
so.
Senior?
I don't recall seeing Bush Senior at all, which is nuts.
Again, these are very obvious things. Like, you could probably watch this movie with no knowledge of Reagan and ask these questions of like, who's his vice president? It's weird that they don't mention who his vice president is. That's weird. Like, there's a lot of that omissions where you're like, this feels like it's lacking a lot of obvious nuance. Yeah. Like the Ollie North stuff, even watching the scenes, not knowing about it, you'd be like, why are they kind of yada-yadaing this and not giving a lot of details? Like, that's weird, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that they knew they were making this movie just for Reagan super fans.
Right. It's not even as propaganda trying to explain much. Meaning that like I don't know too much about like the international aspects of Reagan. And watching this movie, I didn't feel like I learned anything.
Right.
About that. Is like, okay, you went to Russia, he negotiated some stuff. Again, the third act is this mind-numbing sequence of VO and montages of meetings.
Right.
This is where it's supposed to be exciting, you know?
Yeah.
Again, have him get shot in the third act. Have that be, I don't know.
And you're right. I don't think I've ever seen a movie except this one where it opens with that big event and then doesn't circle back to that event at the end. Right, every other movie I've seen where they show the big thing right up front, it's because they're going to take us back to that point. And this, it makes no sense.
Traditionally, that's where the third act starts, is at the thing.
Yeah.
And they do that to grab the audience. They put it a little bit at the beginning to show you, like, this is where we're heading so people don't get bored. And they know to put it at the beginning because it's this mimicry where they've seen other movies do this.
Yeah.
So they go, we should do it too, but they don't know why other movies do it. I can't stress how bad the filmmaking and writing of this movie is.
It's very bad. The acting is bad.
Yes.
I thought Dennis Quaid's Reagan sucked.
And the thing is, Dennis Quaid is not a bad actor.
No.
And so, like, that's where I'm looking at it. And, like, there was a couple moments. There was a part where Xander Berkeley, when they shoot down that plane, and he's just like, damn you all, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, do another take. Oh, my God. Xander Berkeley is a good actor. Certainly, you can have him. John Voight's a good actor. They're all right-wing nuts,
Right.
or at least a lot of them. But, like, that doesn't mean they haven't been in, done good jobs. So it's like, it feels like this is all helmed by someone who is in over their head completely.
And everyone in this has to be a right winger, right? There's no way, like, you're certainly not going to be a leftist and participate in a movie like this.
I assume, but it's hard, man, because, like, I just rewatched Borderlands, right? And that movie is a fucking mess. And there's this thing about acting where it's like, sometimes you just can't see the forest for the trees. You're just saying, Xander Berkeley, or, like, I don't know, Kevin Dillon, he's probably, I don't know. I mean, Kevin Sorbo is certainly a right-wing actor, but, like, or Penelope Ann Miller is Nancy, like, they might be signing on early thinking this is, like, a different movie than it is.
Yeah.
They might just be doing these scenes being like, and this is going to be something, right? Like, it's hard to tell who knows what, but obviously there's, Sorbo and Quaid and John Voight, they're all pretty vocally right wing.
Yeah. I want another Reagan movie. I actually want several Reagan movies, but I would like a very honest Reagan movie. I would say that.
In terms of a pro-Reagan movie, I will say this is good enough. And what I mean is, like, this perfectly is the pro-Reagan movie being this shitty fucking cobbled together mess that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, yeah, that does it. That does his legacy.
Yeah. It's a perfect representation of how people who worship Reagan think about Reagan.
Yes.
Which is just in career highlights with none of the bad stuff.
This skipping over this, like, disjointed web of weird lies.
Yeah.
or like omissions. Because, again, like, this movie doesn't amount to anything. It's a series of scenes. He says, tear down this wall. They play Sweet Child of Mine. Which, again, I'm like, why that song? All right. I think because they could get it.
Yeah.
They could get the song.
In that moment, I was like, did Scorpions tell them no when they wanted to? Because they wanted to play Winds of Change. That song was written by the fucking CIA.
Right.
For Scorpions for that moment. And nope, it's wow, 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 wow. I was like, what is this now?
It's incredible. They end with him finally having Alzheimer's. Secret Service agent don't want to do horse stuff with him anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody watches in reverence as he does one last ride.
Yeah, I like that was the thing. He's like, all right, listen, man, no more horses.
Yeah.
Because you have Alzheimer's. It's like, how do those things even relate?
Right. I guess he gets lost. I don't know. Just slump him on the horse. He'll be fine.
Does the horse have Alzheimer's, or is it Reagan?
Yeah. Just let the horse do it. It's fine.
Yeah. Just whistle at it. It'll come back.
Was the credits over his funeral? I honestly left. I saw the credits roll and I was like, I got to get out of here. This movie is a million years long.
Yeah. I left and was applauding loudly during the funeral scene.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because everyone stayed. Like, I don't know if there was like an end credit scene where fucking Superman shows up or something, but
it'd be amazing.
People were just hanging out. So
they used real footage of Reagan for that scene, but I also, this is one of the, again, this movie $25 million. But boy, they didn't know how to spend that money. There's a few shots where they clearly use real footage of Reagan, not to show that this is really Reagan, but because they couldn't shoot that stuff. Like when he gets on Air Force One, there's shots where I'm like, that's actually Reagan, and this is actually news footage. Not because they wanted to do that, but because they couldn't afford. Like, there's definitely the vibe of like, much like God's Not Dead or any of those, where it's like, this is very low budget. They do not have, they cannot afford much. They spent it all on the actors and a White House set. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So like,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, there's like when he goes to Vegas, there's like montage of stock footage of Vegas. There's a lot of stock footage use.
Yeah.
Snuck in to this one.
Have you ever seen, speaking of actual footage of Reagan, have you ever seen The Reagan Show?
No.
I would highly recommend that as an alternative to the Reagan movie for anyone listening. It's a documentary by a filmmaker named Sierra Pettengill. And her documentaries are all archival footage. And The Reagan Show, for some reason, Reagan, during his second term, insisted on having everything filmed. So she built this documentary out of footage that Reagan and his team filmed himself. And that makes Reagan look the way Reagan is supposed to look. He looks like a fucking asshole.
That's incredible.
And it came out in 2017, and you can still get it. It's streaming places.
Right.
Called The Reagan Show. It's great.
I should watch that, because that's the thing about Reagan is he is, to me, like this abstract, like Nixon, or Kennedy, where it's like, I know him through impressions. You know what I mean?
Or Elvis.
Where like,
kind of.
Or yeah. Like, so like a movie that actually showed nuance, even if it wasn't constantly shitting on him, if it was just like an honest look at Reagan, which would probably be a lot of shitting on him.
Yeah.
I would watch that.
Yeah.
Because like I do want to like know like who is the human being behind this. Like, I don't think it's a good human, but I want to see how these things actually happen.
Yeah.
And this is just nothing.
Yeah, The Reagan Show, it's a lot of him shitting on himself, which that part I like a lot, because it was his idea to film it all. It was his team filming it, and you'll get to a point in that documentary where you're like, you're really still filming all this shit, huh?
Right.
Okay, that's a weird choice.
I actually heard that Reagan, he used to make fun of himself a lot. And that I'm like, okay, I see why that's charming. Like I see why that can be charming. I think it's important to know that stuff. Looking at Trump is another example where it's like, why do they like him? And it's like, there is like, you can see some of at least his older speeches, not the fucking gibberish now, but where it was like, oh, okay, I get it. He's kind of taking the piss out of himself. He's being like funny on purpose. And it is important to understand, like, how are these people charismatic? So like, going back to W, it's like, I don't want that. Right. Like, I don't want an SNL sketch is ultimately what I don't want. And this felt like that, just the other way. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think of Vice? Did you ever see Vice?
I never saw Vice because I was scared it would be more of that.
Yeah. Well, Vice is very funny, but I just didn't like making that story funny. Like, there's nothing funny about Dick Cheney.
Right.
Dick Cheney is a fucking war criminal. And the only legitimately funny things that happen in that movie is all of his heart attacks. Right. That's always funny whenever Dick Cheney has a heart attack. But beyond that, it was a little more honest of a portrayal, but the fact that they made it comedy, I feel like kind of missed the mark. It should have been a horror movie.
It does. I mean, it's part of the problem with politics right now is it's so kind of smug against people like Trump. And like, W was the same, which was like, look at this Joker. And it's like, I mean, he's killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's like, it would be better to explore where it's like, look at this idiot. Can you believe he got elected? And it's like, yeah, but he did. So we should probably think about why that is and what his strengths were that led to that. And like a good Reagan movie would have been just his elections. Yeah. And just looking at him as like a political strategist and like, or rather the people around him doing the actual, political strategy of like all the rat fucking and the racism and like actually exploring these things. But, it just feels like it's either one or the other. It's either we're going to make a movie about how great Reagan is or how cartoonishly bad he was. And again, he was awful.
Yeah.
He was absolutely awful. But like the country didn't think so at the time, and that's worth exploring.
And that's kind of the problem with movies like this. Any time a biopic tries to take on a story where the person has like decades and decades of story to tell, you either got to focus on one moment in that story, like Walk the Line. I hated Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal, but I liked the movie. And I like that it knew to just stick to like 1950s and 60s Johnny Cash without trying to go beyond that. I feel like Ray did the same thing. But like, again, All Eyes on Me, the Tupac movie, they try to get everything in there in 90 minutes and it's not going to work. And with Reagan, like I want an AIDS crisis movie. I want an Iran-Contra movie.
Right.
There's a lot of things about Reagan that I would watch a movie if they really drilled down on specific details and were honest about it. But
yeah,
that's
I think
never going to happen.
More than anything, you need to have a thesis. Like I'm thinking of biopics that actually do like cover a whole life, like Napoleon sort of did, Chaplin did. And the thing about those movies is they still have like a thesis throughout where they know what to show because they know what they're saying about the person.
Right.
And it's still tricky. So you take this director, he's not, this isn't even the director of God's Not Dead, mind you. It's the director of like one of the God's Not Dead sequels.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So it's not even like A-Team God's Not Dead. It's like, this is their direct to streaming version of God's Not Dead. So it's like this writer and director, they just weren't equipped to tell a story. Like pretend for a second you wanted to make a movie that's pro Reagan. They can't do that. They don't know how.
Right.
They can't even cover his life in a way that's interesting. There's no thread except for communism.
He
hates communism.
Communism and Reagan is hero. That's
right.
It.
And it doesn't say anything about him as a person by the end. There's no, like even the like fawning biopics usually have something where they're like that one regret throughout his life or like that one defining thing that you can say at the end is like he was always this. And there's none of that. It's just he was always right and good and didn't do anything wrong. And then he had Alzheimer's. And that's that. And he liked horses. And that's kind of it. But even the horse stuff and like they just skip around. Like it's just I honestly, I'm like, I don't know what they want. It's clearly a movie, like we've been saying, for people who already loved Reagan and just wanted to be like, we did it. We made a Reagan biopic.
Yeah.
And it's great. And we love it.
It's not great.
It's not great. It's the opposite of great.
Yeah. It was bad. It's one of the worst movies I've seen. I've never seen the God's Not Dead movies, but I'm in a fantasy football league right now with a bunch of other like streamers and content creators and whatnot. And the punishment for the loser is we have to watch all 3 God's Not Dead movies and do a live stream about it.
That's awful. I've only seen the first one, and it's the same problem as that is mostly around conservative media, which is that when you make any piece of art or storytelling where you start with a political or ideological goal and like a chip on your shoulder about it, you don't make good things. And again, we brought up W. There's left-leaning versions of this. Hell, there's not even like necessarily political versions of this. Biopics where they say, like, I feel like any biopic where like the person it's about is heavily involved is that, right?
Yeah.
Wherever you're like, I want a result first. And when you're so blinded by that, it's just crap. It's just utter crap. the God's Not Dead films are like some of the most like they don't know how to depict people who are not them. Like they have a character in that who's the liberal, godless reporter, right?
Sure.
And what sums it up perfectly is there's a scene where she's at home writing her like article and she's listening to music and the music is Christian rock. And it's that where they're like, they don't know any other music to play.
Right.
So like, why would this character be listening to Christian rock? It's because that's all they had. And that perfectly encapsulates it, where it's like, there's no nuance. They don't know how to show people they don't necessarily agree with, right? Like,
yeah.
And so that's what this is. It's more of that. And so it's ultimately just the most flaccid thing. On top of the fact that since they don't know how to make a movie, it's like, I'm honestly, if I was a big Reagan fan, I would come out of this being like, well, that sucked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. You have to be beyond a Reagan fan, I think, to call this a good movie. Like you have to be pretty well delusional. Like you're a Reagan fundamentalist.
Yeah, the Rotten Tomatoes for this says it all, which is low critic score because it's a bad movie, with just angry, fawning audience score, high audience score, because they see it as a culture war, where they're like, we have to like this. Right. It is our duty to like this thing. And it's like, what an exhausting existence to have to sit down this 2 hour and 15-minute movie and have to be like, this is good and right, and the critics are wrong.
Yeah.
And they're just a bunch of libs, because this is what movies are. This is good movies.
It is not good movies. Have you ever seen The Trump Conspiracy?
No.
It is also a movie based on actual events. I don't know how many people are familiar with this part of Trump's election when he was elected in 2016. There was a guy, and this is what the Trump Conspiracy movie is about. There was a guy who was just watching TV and got a message from God that Trump was going to be our next president. And he goes to his psychiatrist and tells his psychiatrist this. And instead of his psychiatrist being like, all right, well, hearing voices is bad, we should probably look into that, his psychiatrist is like, wait, God told you what? Oh, I got to get you in touch with my wife. And it turns out his wife was this evangelical Christian networker.
Oh no.
So right off the bat, that feels like malpractice kind of. But
yeah, that's pretty illegal.
She ends up organizing this daily prayer phone call where people just get on the phone and pray that Trump's going to become president. And by the end, there's like 150,000 people on that call every day.
Jesus.
And that is all that movie is about, is just, hey, look, God picked Trump, so you should vote for him.
Oh my God.
It reminds me a lot of, not really the Reagan movie, but it's that same just fucking fawning worship energy. At no point is anyone like, wait, God picked Trump?
Right.
Have you ever heard about all the shit Trump has done? There's none of that. It's just, shit, God said, huh? All right.
And again, this felt like it was clearly trying to reflect all that shit of like, I think the focus on communism, I think the pre-election of it all, where they're like, yeah, Reagan fought the commies because God sent him. And that's, perhaps what's going on today. It's a lot of that, which is funny because also they're like, Reagan beat the commies, so watch out for commies today. And it was like, well, he didn't beat the commies then, did he? Huh?
Yeah.
He did a bad job, didn't he?
Yeah. How come there's still protesters? That's weird.
Yeah. I feel like we glossed by, but there is a scene where God chooses Reagan, where someone says God has told you, and the KGB agent goes like, do you think it was true? And it's like they treat him like this mystical creature, where they're talking about like, oh, is it possible? It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Just the framing from the KGB shaking in their boots like, we failed because of this one man. We're so scared of him.
That
Incredible.
is very much the vibe with the KGB characters in this. It's just, they are also so in awe of Ronald Reagan, which that's not how that went. This movie, I would argue, especially in the way it treats protesters, is actually a little un-American.
Yes.
Because they, throughout all of this, treat the notion of protesting as some kind of bad thing that only no-goodniks do.
Right. You'd think there'd be, because they try to do a lot of Reagan moments where he's just like, well, I'm all for American freedom, but like protesting, he's like, bad.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't, there's never a scene where he's like, I respect their right for protest. None of that. He just mocks them, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that way, this, I don't know, if you're like a Reagan fan and watching this and you're like, oh, this is America, it's like, that's fascist as fuck.
Yeah.
What you're talking about there. But
it's,
people who follow leaders like Reagan and Trump, there's been like psychological studies done over the course of lots of years about people who follow those type of leaders. And one thing they excel at is compartmentalized thinking.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense because there's a lot of contradictions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, especially even with Reagan, there's a ton of contradictions, but especially with Trump. My God.
Yeah, there's probably some in this movie. Even this like fawning portrayal of him. Yeah, I can't be stressed enough how everything that's against Reagan in this is heavily applied to be communists.
Yep.
Or like the work. Like I couldn't believe that they have a fake KGB guy being like, yeah, we totally infiltrated Hollywood. And they need to show the importance of that because there's nothing like the Republicans love more than like going after liberal woke Hollywood. Yeah. So they have to show like, yes, that's actually a really good battle is against, because that's where the communists, they infiltrate Hollywood all the time. So when you're fighting, like when you're angry at like the next Marvel movie for having a woman in it, you're fighting. That's a real fight.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that shit.
Yeah, this is, I think, for them, this is the perfect time to put this movie out because it does seem like, Trump never comes up, but it does throughout all of this kind of feel like they're saying, hey, look at all this stuff that happened to Reagan. Does it sound familiar? Does it sound like, because remember when we tried to destroy Trump by impeaching him and like.
Oh man, are you excited for the Trump biopic 40 years from now?
Oof.
Where he's just a humble guy. Just trying to make America great again for the American people, and everybody tries to stop him.
And it's whittling wood on his front porch.
Yeah, riding horses.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck me.
Fighting in wars. None of that happened.
I'm glad they didn't pretend like Reagan did anything during the war. I appreciated that they showed the truth, which is that he just made a series of films during the war, and that's all. Again, even they couldn't like lie. They didn't want to lie out. Well, they didn't want to like create new lies. Like there's a lot of, it's a lot of like trying to worm around things as opposed to outright bold-faced. And he did this thing that didn't happen. Like it's like real weasel shit, this movie.
Yeah. There was nothing about the savings and loan crisis. I hated that. That's a really underrated scandal in the Reagan administration. We don't learn that the Reagan administration was the most indicted administration in presidential history. Nothing about that.
Nothing new. Again, for both sides. Yeah. There's nothing even like, did you know he did this good thing? It's like, no, it's just, again, all the hits. It's all the like, comparing to like a biopic about like a musician, it would be the equivalent of just showing every time the musician came up with a popular song and nothing else. Like, no, there's nothing that you don't know just from like the general vibes around Reagan that's in this movie. Is like, yeah, he did that thing. He liked jelly beans. He said that thing. And there's nothing new.
Yeah, at least explain the fucking jelly bean thing. Why was he so goddamn obsessed with jelly beans? You can't tell us that. He does say it.
To the movie's credit, he says, "This is how I quit smoking."
Oh, okay.
So, sure.
How funny would it be if the jelly beans are what gave him his dementia?
Yeah. Oh, and this like went hard on the jelly beans. Like they show like the communists running the jelly beans factory or something. I want that. Oh, fuck this. I have nothing else to say.
Yeah.
This movie, it wasn't even like fun. Like that's ultimately like, it was so boring. It was like just, again, a montage with absolutely no humanity. Nothing. There's nothing here. It's just slipping through my fingers as I talk about it.
Yeah, it's a propaganda film. It is 100% a propaganda film.
And a bad one. It's bad at that. Because I would argue this movie is only for that audience you saw. Old people who remember loving Reagan. Like, this isn't going to draw in new people. No. This isn't like, hey, kids, come see this cool Reagan movie. It's just, it's like the Fox News of movies, where it's just like, our audience is all 80, and this is what you want. This is the slop, and that's it.
Yeah, slop is a good way to put it. It is. Yeah, it is a sloppy movie, and it is about as fulfilling as slop. I hated it so much.
And it's not doing great. So
good.
It's doing as well as Reagan's movies did, you know?
Yeah.
Last time I checked, it didn't even make $1 million. It was making like, let's see, I don't know. It depends on who you ask or like where you read, but I saw it was like $500,000. I'm sure it'll make a couple million this weekend. It's the thing where it's a culture war where it's like, it doesn't matter. Like there will be people coming out of this being like, that was good and it did good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the reality is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the movie.
It's not good.
No, don't see it.
Don't go see Reagan.
Not even ironically, like it's just not.
Yeah, it's like not even. I'm not a big proponent of the idea of movies being so bad they're good, but this definitely is not that. This is just bad.
Yeah.
There's nothing enjoyable about it. The most fun I had was like yelling provocative shit out during the movie to make the audience angry.
Piss off the audience, yeah.
That was it. That's all I had.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it was just fucking boring.
Yeah. Snooze fest.
Yeah.
So that's Reagan.
It's Reagan.
Fuck this film.
Fuck Reagan.
I'm never going to think about it again.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I really hate, I know we're pretty much done, but
that's fine.
A thing that doesn't really ever go mentioned is Reagan wasn't like, this was the American government during this time. It wasn't just Reagan. And the shit the American government led by Reagan was getting up to was not heroic at all. But
no, opposite.
Yeah. You're not going to hear any of that in this movie. I hate it. I hate it.
It's a useless movie. Again, even as a pro-Reagan movie, it's useless. It has no reason to exist.
Yeah. There's not a lot of there's no artistic merit to it.
No. None whatsoever. All right. Well.
Yeah.
Reagan. Adam, thank you so much for being on this.
Thank you for letting me be the one to be on this episode.
Yeah. Delight. It was a delight. Do you want to plug some stuff here at the end?
Patreon.com/unpops. You can get, that's where I have a bunch of bonus stuff, or youdontpod.supercast.com, or just my podcasts are everywhere podcasts are at. In broad daylight. You don't even like the show. You don't even like sports, conspiracy, the show. We got something for everybody. As long as you're into sports, news, or conspiracies.
Yeah, everybody check that out. And I'll plug patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We have a movie night every Friday night. I don't think I will ever play the Reagan movie unless I want to hurt you. Like, unless I'm mad at the world and I want to hurt the world.
Right.
But yeah, check that out. And check out Reagan's Wikipedia page. Don't.
Watch the Reagan show. Watch the Reagan show. It's a short documentary that is about Reagan, and it's very good.
Yeah, or like watch another Dennis Quaid movie.
Yeah.
Like
watch Enemy Mine.
Yeah. Watch Enemy Mine. Holy shit. Oh, we should have done that for this.
Yeah, we should. It would be funny if we just talked about that movie
like it was Reagan.
As if
like
it was
I was
Reagan.
very confused.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why there was an alien in it. It's very strange.
It's a very artistic choice. Hey, listen, our music is produced by Chris Corlew. You can find him on twitter.com as the Corlew or go to shipwreckedsailor.bandcamp.com. Our channel artwork is produced by Michael Vincent Bramley. For more of his work, go to mvbramley.art. Our episode artwork is by Justin Brown, available on Twitter as Justin T. Brown or at artnessbyjustinbrown.com. And finally, additional artwork is by Starlene Hodge. You can find her work at starlenearts.com or on Twitter as StarleneX. Cool. Goodbye.